All right, what it do, people? Saturday night and decided to go for a walk. And I think it was the perfect time to film a video while doing it. You get to see these nice little sights around here. Got the sun over here. Got a little walking trail. So I can't believe it. It's been 1 year since I started going to therapy, and I'm really shocked, to be honest. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I started going April of last year, and here it is, April of 2024, and I've been seeing the same person, same therapist for a year. So let's get into it and let's talk about it a little bit. So initially, one of the reasons why I decided to go to therapy was because in my last job, I was working on the ship as a contractor, sort of, and basically, long story short, I was playing pickup basketball on the ship, got hurt, tore my quad and my meniscus, and then I had to get off the ship and require surgery, and eventually it led to me actually having to resign from my job. So because of that, I was in a state of just feeling very lost, feeling very sad, and just saying, damn, what am I supposed to do now? Because it's one thing when you quit a job that you don't like and it's willingly you quit. It's another thing when you're forced to have to resign and it's out of your hands. So that was what's going on with me. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just called different hotlines. I think I want to say it's called Vets for Wars, to talk to them on the phone. And then eventually, I think within maybe a few days, they got in contact with the VA, and the VA set up an appointment to see a therapist in the care. They call it care in the community. And I was able to get enrolled. And I'll talk about therapy for people who have never been to a therapist. This is basically what happened with me. So once I got the referral to go see a therapist, the therapist I was working with works outside of like a small little office building. Looks like a house garage, basically, as far as the size of it. But I walk in the office and I'm greeted by the secretary that works with the therapist, the assistant. I fill out some paperwork, and generally if you go to a doctor's appointment, any appointment that you've never been to before, you're gonna have to fill out some paperwork. Just a heads up. But one paperwork that I do remember is like a questionnaire, and I don't know exactly what the name of the questionnaire is, like specific terms, but it's basically rating how depressed I am. So when you read the questions, it just makes you feel even more sadder, because it's like the questions they're asking you is just like, man, you must really want me to feel down. I guess that's how therapy is in business. That's just a theory here. It's like, yeah, you know what? If we were never sad, then would therapy ever be needed? But that's not the reality. You know what I'm saying? We all go through things. So as I'm filling out the questionnaire, secretary takes the paperwork, and then eventually I go into the office to speak with the therapist. And then you go through your normal meet and greet, like you introduce yourself, they introduce themselves to tell you about what their experience, what they here to do. And what I think the cool thing about going to a therapist, to be honest, is they get paid to listen to you talk to them about your personal problems. I think it's the coolest thing in the world, if you ask me, because think about it. How many times have you tried to tell maybe somebody about a particular issue you may be going through, and then some people just brush you off? They don't want to hear. They just try to change the subject because they don't want to hear about your problems. Whereas the therapist, they're paid to listen to you talk about your issues. And I look at therapy as a way to help, as a tool. I look at it as a tool that you can use to help aid in your self-discovery of yourself, or whatever particular issue you may be going through. It helps bridge that gap. It's still up to you as the individual person to still put in the work in order to be successful and help overcome whatever situation that you're going through. And I think of, like, when you see a therapist, I think of it almost like almost like seeing a friend, not necessarily your friend, but somebody you can almost look up to, and somebody who's willing to have an ear for you, and kind of they're in your corner. Basically, the therapist is there to be in your corner to help you get to where you want to get to. And if you utilize the tools that the therapist may suggest to you, you have a better chance of getting to where you want to get to. This is assuming you got the right therapist in front of you to deal with the issue that you may be particularly dealing with. Like one issue that I struggle with to this day, for me, is food addiction. So I'm trying to ultimately change the relationship I have with food. And that's one of the things the therapist has really been helping me deal with. I have an unhealthy relationship with food. And because of that, I have to try to figure out a different outlet to dealing with that, because I need to find a healthier way to deal with that instead of resorting to the comfort food. That's just how it is for me. And one of the sessions I remember going to, she suggested the symptoms of why you overeat, why overeat, dealing with those symptoms, because it made a lot of sense to me when she kind of said that. If I deal with the reasons on why I overeat and deal with the symptoms, then even when I do eventually overcome this issue, it's going to be easier to be able to walk away and be like, all right, I feel competent that I can deal with it. Because the reality with any addiction, the first thing we have to know that we have this problem, because that's half the battle, is actually knowing you got the problem. And then on top of that, what are you going to do about it to help? What's a good alternative or something you could do that can take, because you may not necessarily replace your addiction. You may not always replace your addiction, but you got to be able to find a better coping mechanism to fall back to instead of relying on your addiction. That's just kind of how I'm looking at it. So going on this walk right now really is helpful, because it kind of takes my mind. I'm not thinking about food while I'm on this walk so much. And what I've noticed for myself, when I try to keep myself busy, it really does help me a lot, because I sometimes don't have the headspace to be obsessing about what type of food that I may want. So, and being in therapy for a year has really helped me. It's helped me challenge my self-doubt that I've had about myself. And it's helping me face the fears that I may have for myself and say, if I want to get better, I'm going to have to work on this. And this is something I have to work on every day. When it comes to food, for me, it matters every meal I eat. And the big thing when it comes to these addictions, well, we also have to remember, if you struggle with an addiction, you realize you have the power to change it, but also this is when the accountability comes into play. Not only do you know that you have the power to overcome these addictions, but you also have to know that you're making the choice. You either choose to continue to indulge in your addiction, or you choose to try to make better choices. That is going to be the hardest part for anybody. It's a choice that you have to make continuously. So if you take back your power and you say, you know what, I'm not going to let this situation or any situation you're going through take you down, then you're on your way to getting successful. It's maintenance at the end of the day. You got to really want it for yourself, and your actions have to speak louder than your words. And that's exactly what I'm going through now. My actions matter, because before I came out here and decided to film this video and go on this walk, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat after I'm done with this walk. So it matters. I have to still continuously try to better myself. Even if I slip up, I have to be able to get back up the next morning and be like, okay, let's get better tomorrow, or let's get better on the next meal, whatever the case scenario is. But I think therapy is really cool because just the simple fact that you get to talk to somebody about problems that you may not feel personally comfortable talking to certain people about, because you're in a non-judgmental free zone basically when you're in therapy. And they also, the therapist generally, well, basically the therapist has a confidential agreement. So as long as you're not threatening harm to anybody or yourself or anything like that, nothing crazy, then you can basically tell the therapist what you may be going through, right? Like, for example, if you have somebody, let's say you're in a relationship and you're having arguments with your significant other or something like that, you can have, that's a safe place for your therapist. You can talk to your therapist about situations like that, because you may be just trying to get some advice like, I don't know how to deal with this. And that's when the therapist can really come in handy, because he or she can give you some tips to help you deal with situations that you may not be ready for. Or if, let's say, you're a new parent and you just don't feel like you just need someone to kind of help talk to you on the emotional end of it. Like, how do you deal with the challenge of being a new parent when you never had a kid before? So I think therapists can really be helpful in so many different ways.